Hey guys, welcome back to me with a haircut. Literally, I could have made a wig with as much hair as on the floor. My sweet Barbara Envia. Okay, without further ado, this is like day 6 or 7. It doesn't really matter. I'm all over the place day wise, and as you can see, I might have a haircut, which weeks could have passed months. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna revert or regress or return to the beginning of the screenplay. I think I was kind of like all over the place. I was kind of shocked by this, AI revelation I had last week, which it turns out a lot of people hate it. I mean, of course, people hate AI, and that's why I wrote a blog on my website about me versus AI, but that was in written form. And even since then, it's like, oh my God, I've seen how much they can actually just steal from the creative world and recreate it. But yeah, the visuals are pretty amazing and creepy and scary in a weird way and maybe good. But it definitely intrigued me. That's why I was babbling about it. Sorry for that. But, for those of you who know me, that's part of my trademark. I might go off on a tangent and hopefully it's at least entertaining, hopefully valuable. Who knows? But, now it's documented. So my insanity is proven for the ages if I decide to post this. Let's think about that. Anyway, I promised to go through this thing scene by scene, and I believe I'm going to have to cross-check myself. I think I'm going to start having a spreadsheet of what I babble about, just because I go all over the place. But I think I did actually show both the test scenes, introduction scenes that I wrote initially, like a dream sequence and the mad scientist winemaker as a teenager in America scenes that are not in the screenplay. And not anymore anyway. Who knows? Anything can come back or happen. But for now, I really like this new beginning that, again, this nice guy, Adrian from Los Angeles, kind of inspired me to make, because I do want it to be somewhat, not, I don't want it to be a copy of any movie, but I'm inspired by Sideways, which has something to do with wine. That's about the only similarity. And the melodrama, it's sort of a midlife crisis movie, right? So in a way, some of that might shine here. We'll see. But regardless, the scene that I wrote, the initial scene with the grandfather and the young little Mass, 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, whatever he is, going through stages until he's a teenager, and he's standing next to his grandfather's grave and putting an apple on it. That's the opening, right? So it's a little more, melancholic, somber, that wonderful, again, Somewhere Over the Rainbow song, with the what's it called, not a banjo, a ukulele, I guess, a little miniature guitar. It's a wonderful song. But then I go back to the opening scene, which I mentioned, I think, in brief, but basically it's to go through the scene because it's actually interesting. I was just looking at my own work, because sometimes you forget your stuff. It's another good writer's tool, by the way. Get away from your own work once in a while, because it gets so ingrained, that you don't notice stuff, you forget stuff, or you forget that the audience doesn't know. That's the main thing, actually. That's one thing I've always told my students, is you got to be careful, because you can't give too much information, but you don't want to give too much. Because if you give too much information, it's over the top, it's boring. But if you don't give enough information, nobody knows what the hell's going on. And guess what? In Netflix or whatever, they can just click away, right? Or the TV. But even in the movie theater, it's like, we have to understand what's going on, but let's be subtle about it. Be sly, be smart about how you present information that's necessary, like exposition, or else just how you tell your story, okay? So again, efficiency is key, but also be unique. I guess that's what AI can't quite do yet, I hope. Anyway, regardless, the first scene, the first scene after the first scene, the second scene, I guess, where we now for the first time meet Mass as a grown-up. Well, I guess we saw him at the end of the last scene as a grown-up next to his grandfather's grave. See, I'm already forgetting my own stuff. I think he was 40 years old. He may have been younger. But now he's 40 years old, basically, 41 or something like that, and he's a teacher. So there's a lot of important stuff you have to get in those introductory scenes. And in this one, we learn his name, B, his profession, right? So it's Mass Anderson as of now. And of course, names will probably change when this thing's actually finally corrected. But I'm calling him Mass for now. And he's 41 years old, and he is a teacher at a grade school. He's like an 8th grade basically a science teacher. Very, very slightly inspired by one of my favorite TV series, of course, Breaking Bad. Wasn't Walter White he was like a biology teacher in high school. But that's about the only similarity. I just had to have, it needs to be science for, winemaking reasons. But so how did I come up with this particular scene, which is, basically, and the whys of this scene? Well, first of all, I figured it's always important to introduce your protagonist, your hero or heroine early on in a interesting way, let's just say. And so, and learn as much about them as possible early on, hopefully empathize with them or identify with them. And I think it works pretty well in this first scene, because we get sort of the goal it's presented of the whole film, which subtly was actually hinted at in this opening, where he's in his apple orchard vineyard and tasting wine with his old granddad. But it's a little kid. I don't think most people would understand what the story's going to be about from that sequence, other than he had a bond with his grandfather who had this special hobby. But that's expanded upon and followed up with this scene, which I think makes it more clear, which is the classroom scene where it starts with the apple, where it's meet Annabelle. And the thing that's special about Annabelle is what's special about the movie, and special about this guy who actually lives and works. He lives that way. He works over there in this wonderful winery, the Anderson Winery. It's because he's got this wonderful apple that he created, right? And it's unique to this region. It's due to the acidity and the climate and everything. Denmark, or the Scandinavian countries anyway, are pretty terrific for apple growing. Not for grape growing, as mentioned, but for apples for sure. And so the fact that his grandfather, we saw in the earlier scene, had crossbred a very unique apple that was extremely popular and delicious, that he had dubbed Annabelle after his wife, which we see on the grave marker just in the previous scene, is very important, because it's basically everything. Because this journey is going to take us into France and the wine industry, where this apple is going to defeat the wine industry. Basically, it's all about that. And to get there, we have to establish it. We have to introduce it properly. So the way I figured to do that was actually to bring kids in. Why not? Because you need to bounce ideas back and forth. Sure, I could go with his wife or his friends, his colleagues that he's going to be working with. I thought, kids, this would be really great, because in real life, Matt's was a grade school teacher as well before he left. So that's also reality. So it made sense to me. And with kids, the sky's the limit. They have big imaginations, and there's a variety of them. There's cliques, they're forced to be there. So right off the bat, I have, of course, like 3 main kid characters in there. One of them's like this wise ass, I think, named Victor, and then there's this girl who's like a nerd who knows everything. I think he calls her like, Miss Google or something like that. Did I just lose this camera? Let me just see. So abracadabra, and it's a day later, different location. Sorry, I got cut off the other day. The stupid phone, my old Samsung workhorse, ran out of battery, or it started to run out of battery, and it pushed the lens, and that was it, kaput. So let's see if I can refresh my memory or recreate what happened when I left off. Not too difficult, considering it's the first, or actually the second sequence or scene from the entire screenplay, which I still haven't decided yet whether I will include or not. I probably will. I'll put them in as individual scenes in written form so you can read them. Anyway, this was the Annabelle scene, which is extremely important scene, of course, because it's a lot about introductions and the story. So abracadabra, here I am at a completely different location and a different day, because the other day I got cut off, as you will witness or just witnessed, and I had to stop. It was too bad. I was on a roll.